You're tuned in to Positively Terrible. I'm producer Dan, and each week my buddy Scott and I discuss surviving and thriving after trauma. It's a journey that started when Scott, his wife's fiance, and her boyfriend walked into a bar. This week's decent human being is Tonje. She's got a fucked up story about an unforeseen death. Settle in, my terrible listeners. Today's episode is going to be positively terrible.
I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Dan. What's going on, man?
Oh, I crossed a big hurdle this week.
Oh,
big hurdle in my life.
Let me hear about it.
All right, so I'm going to try to wrap this up real quick, but so I haven't drank for about 2 years, two years plus now, and I think one of the things that drinking really did well for me was help me. I could put up with anything. If I had beer, I could put anything off for a little bit longer. And one of the things that I ended up putting off for 20 years was going to the dentist. And this week I went to the dentist and I logged over 5 hours in the dentist chair this week. And I probably have about 5 more to log. And it cost me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And I did a lot of dental work this week, Scott, and I'm still here. And although it wasn't pleasantly, surprisingly good, I made it through.
Well, that's the happiest I've ever seen someone for spending thousands of dollars and spending hours in the dental chair. So I think that you and I need to celebrate. How does Casey's Pizza sound?
Yes, let's do it. I can chew on both sides of my mouth now. Let's get some Casey's Pizza.
All right. Well, Casey's Pizza, for anyone who doesn't know, which is most of the world, is the best pizza you can get at a gas station in the Midwestern United States. So
that's a fact.
If you like to eat at gas stations, this is so much better than your, the taquitos or whatever at 7-Eleven that you can pick up. So Dan, let's do that. I've been craving it. Actually, I'll be in the suburbs today, and I know I'm going to be close to one, but I'm going for a birthday party for my nephew, and I just know that I'm going to feel the pull to go to Casey's and get a slice of pizza. But
a lot of gravity to Casey's.
Yeah. But Tonje is here with us today. Tonje, you are from Europe. Do they have gas station pizza anywhere in Europe?
Yes, probably every single place.
Oh, okay. This is a fact I was going to say, it's a fact I didn't expect. I thought that might be a very American, because you can see Dan and I are very good at eating the American diet. I wasn't sure if you could stop and get a slice of pizza or anything at a gas station in Europe. But
how often do you eat gas station pizza?
Probably not since I was 16.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yes, it's been a while.
That's probably the answer that I should strive to give.
Most adults would give that answer.
But I have a few vices, and that one's not too terrible, I wouldn't say. So Tonje, and Tonje, I'm going to forgive me. I know you gave us permission to call you Tonje today because I attempted multiple times to say your name. Thought that I had it pretty close, but your response was just call me Tonje. So, can you tell the audience how you actually pronounce it? I like to respect our guests. This is your name.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird since I'm Norwegian. It's Tonje.
Okay. Tonje. I see the face you're making. So I'm not going to try again. I appreciate having an alternative.
You did do better than most telephone salespeople. They completely butcher it.
That's a real low bar, but I'm glad we hit it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say you'd be surprised at the amount of telemarketers who pronounce my name wrong, okay?
Yeah.
So, Tonje, thank you for being here today. In the intro Dan just read, we said that you're here to talk about an unforeseen death. And I know most deaths, not most, but many deaths are unforeseen. And I know that this one is a pretty traumatic one that has changed your life. So thank you for being here and willing to share. Can you tell us a little bit about who died, what the circumstances were?
Yes, of course. And first, thank you so much for having me and giving me this platform to share on. I think it's so valuable. Yeah, so for me, it was in February 2018. So it's actually, we just picked the 6-year mark.
Wow.
And it was my youngest daughter at the time who completely out of the blue passed away. She wasn't sick. She was as healthy as could be. And I was away on a work trip. So all of a sudden, while running around doing my work, I get that call that no mom ever wants to hear.
Yeah. Incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I'm so sorry that happened. And how old was your daughter at the time?
She was 1.5.
Yeah. Wow. Very young. And I know that when it comes to death, the death of a child is incomparable. It's just something that no one should ever have to go through. But let's go back a little bit further. Let's talk about some of the happy stuff. So you said the youngest daughter, youngest of how many children?
All right. So right now, I'm the mother of 4.
Okay.
When she passed away, I had 2 girls.
Okay.
And that was supposed to be it. So they were, we were 100% sure that was it. We were
Right.
so happy and pleased with like 2 girls. They were best of friends. And, you plan your whole future with that, don't you? Yeah. So we had, my oldest daughter, she's 10 this summer. And then I've had 2 boys afterwards.
Okay. So when you had your first child, like, what were I know there's a lot of emotion when you have a child, but what were kind of the fears? I know that that's one thing that everybody has, is those fears of what it's going to be like to be a parent, their health and all of that. Was it a scary thing to have children?
Well, it's scary to be a parent. I don't know that I was so scared to become one.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been like quite a tomboy. So I used to not be attached to my emotions. I used to like just kind of shove them back and be the tough person. And I didn't really worry about, the dangers that could come. I'm a bit more of always been a bit of a daredevil myself and like the adrenaline and everything. So I didn't have that worry. But actually, when our first daughter was born, she was born 10 weeks premature. I was actually in the gym. Me and my husband were in the gym, and all of a sudden I started bleeding. So we had rushed to the hospital. So we spent the first 6 weeks of her life in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And the first morning, because they took her straight from me and into an incubator and everything. And, and like at 5:00 at night, one of the nurses came into me and she goes, "I'm so sorry to have to tell you this. It's, it's bad, but your daughter, around 2:00, her lung just froze up and she couldn't breathe anymore." And I'm thinking, oh, she's dead. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
And then she goes, "But she's okay now." I'm like, why didn't you lead with that?
I was going to say, oh God, that's got to be, so scary.
Yeah. So we kind of got like a kind of direct introduction to that. And she had, so that kind of showed us that, okay, parenting can be scary. Parenting can be really scary. So we were really happy when our second daughter was born, almost at term, healthy as could be. So our first daughter, she'd had a couple run-ins at the hospital and different things that had happened. But our second daughter, she was just healthy. She barely had one cold her whole life.
What was the age difference between the two?
2 years.
Okay. So you've got a 2-year-old, you've been through some scary stuff. A lot of parents go through a lot of scary things. You make it through and you're like, okay, Number two's here. Number two is, and you, the two of you can correct. I have 0 kids, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can only imagine that you're a lot more prepared for that second child. And going into it, did you feel like, okay, this is going to be easier? We know what we're in for?
Oh yeah, definitely. And especially since, like I said, the first one was born 10 and a half weeks premature. I wasn't ready at all. I hadn't bought anything. So I was completely unprepared. So by the second one, we were like, okay, maybe we should, set things up early. And like you said, yeah, of course, you've been through it, even though each child is different and they, have their different ways. Once you've had one, you think you know how to do the second
one. Well, and that's, I like that you said that. Like, what was her personality, and like how was she compared to her sister at that young age?
She was a firecracker. Like, she was bubbly, and she just adored her older sister. Her older sister, she's always been very like mothering with the younger ones. Okay. She's always tried to be like an adult, even when she was like 3.5, which she was at the time when this happened. She was like trying to be the adult in the room. Whereas the youngest, who passed away, she was just like fun, just playing and fun and laughing and smiling all the time.
So were they close then?
Very close, yeah.
Okay. And what does that look like with a 2-year-old and a newborn and a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old? What does that relationship look like?
They would play together all the time, and as soon as the youngest started kindergarten, they would go visit each other in the different classes and just hang out there at home. As soon as they got home, they were just running around playing. So basically all day they were playing together.
Okay. Do you have any particular memories of their interactions that you'd want to share with us?
I have vivid memories of them laying on the floor, rolling around on top of each other. I was trying to do a photo shoot of them. I'm also a photographer in my previous life. And I was trying to take photos of them, and I put out like a nice looking blanket, and they were just rolling around laughing, like could not be serious. And I have luckily lots of nice photos of them doing that.
Well, I can only imagine that both made it difficult to photograph, but also kind of those got to be great pictures.
Yeah, fun
to have them rolling around and playing, even if you might have wanted to rearrange them a couple of times. All right. So you said that she had survived or had lived to 18 months. What is an 18-month-old like? I mean, I know they're talking and walking and stuff like that. I just don't know how much. So what is an 18-month-old? What was she like?
Okay, so, well, it's very different from child to child, but in her case, she was running around, walking. She'd started to talk, but the language is kind of limited, which means they have a lot of emotions, a lot of tempers, because they get frustrated. They can't say everything they want to say. So it's like really high highs and really low lows all the time, and it's a bit of a roller coaster. But they are hilarious because once they start getting close, like close to 1.5, that's when really the personality starts to come out.
Yeah.
And I love that age between 1.5 and just before and up to 2, because that's when they really like just every day you just see and get to learn and see them more and more.
Yeah. I love being an uncle. And I remember when my first niece was born, everything was so exciting from day one until forever. When the second one came around, my nephew, sorry, buddy, but I didn't give a shit until you could walk and talk and interact. And it sounds like she's reaching kind of that age at that time. And
oh yeah.
And definitely. As a mom, I know you've got a bond from the beginning, but when they start communicating, that bond just kind of goes through the roof, at least from my perspective and from my relationship with my nieces and nephews. So
yeah, definitely. And I think it's And you've got a point there. I know you're saying talking about nieces and nephews, but there is a difference between mom and dad. Not always. I mean, different families have it differently, but it was definitely a case with us. But he's the girls loved my husband as well, like absolutely. But it's, as a mom, you love that, all holding them and carrying them and doing all this. And of course I was like, I need to go back to work, but but at that age, like once they're above 1 and they start like really doing things and you can play with them, and it's a very different situation.
It's special. There's not really another way to describe it. And you just said the difference between mom and dads, and you carried this child inside of you. It's a bond that has started before you've ever met them, and I just can't imagine that. It's got to be a wonderful experience. So from what I'm hearing, then things were good. You didn't have any reason to suspect that there would be an incident, correct?
No, none at all. No, everything was great. It was, I'd been home. I was working, but I was at home. I'd only ever been one night away from her before.
Oh, wow.
So we were thinking everything was fine and safe. So that's why I went away on the business trip, because there was nothing. She wasn't sick, nothing.
So where'd you go? Like, how far away were you from home?
Well, Norway is a very mountainous country. So in airline, it's not very far, but it is like if you were to drive, it takes you about 12 hours. I was up in the mountains on the east side, where I was getting in a winter cabin, styled and photographed, ready for sale. And we live on the southwest coast. So it's I was flying that distance, and that still meant it's a 1-hour flight from where I live to Oslo, and then you have to drive another 3 hours to get to the cabin.
And can you tell me a little bit about the day? And I mean, like, starting from your first memories of that day. I'm going to make an assumption that might be a day that everything from breakfast until you at least heard the news is kind of in your head still.
Yeah, I actually didn't even have breakfast because I was working. So I was in my work mode, when I got up in the morning because I flew up the day before. So I'd been working all the other day, and, I knew that the girls had gone to bed fine. I spoke to my husband, and he said like, yeah, and she was running up the stairs with a smile and went to bed, no problem.
And girls are home just with dad. Is that right?
Yes. The girls were home with dad. So I'd gotten up early in the morning and I was just running around working. Like, I get in the zone and I'm just going. And then the phone rang, and it was still early morning, but I'd been working for a few hours, and I was actually annoyed. It's like, why are you bothering me? I'm working. But to my surprise, it was my brother who called. And all he would say was, Tonje, you need to come home. You need to come home as soon as you can. Come home. I said, why? What's your problem? Why? I'm working. It's like, no, you have to come home. But he wouldn't tell me anything more. So I hung up and I called my husband straight away. And he picked up straight away. But all I could hear was crying. And I thought, oh my God, what's happened? And I immediately thought it was our oldest daughter. And I sank to the ground. And then I could hear him say, Alia's dead. And that's our youngest. And I was like, no. So I kind of bounced to my feet. I'm like, no, this is not possible. And he's like, yeah, you have to come home. They need to do an autopsy. You have to come home. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Okay. I'm on my way. So now I was on a mission, because in my head, I was thinking, if I can just get home and pick her into my arms, my mama love is going to bring her back to life. And I was like, yes, yeah, that's going to work. I have to believe in that. So I rushed off to the airport, 3 hours drive. And I get to the airport, I run inside, up to the counters, trying to get flight. Go to the first one, no. Second one, no. And it just It just seems like nobody wants to help me, and everyone's just pulling away. And you know how airports are always crowded. I felt like I was the only one in the building. Finally, I get to the counter, and I'm getting more and more desperate. And then I hear myself say, my daughter just died. I need to get home. And I can feel like a piece of me dying because I didn't want to believe in it. You know, I told myself that it's not true in order to be on my feet. And now I had to say it. But I got a flight, and then I had to go and wait by the gate. And I guess because I had to say those words, I fell to the ground and I kind of started crying. And then I could see guards coming towards me. These two men. And they're saying, ma'am, you need to get up. You can't sit here crying. And they were getting ready to toss me out of the airport. But fortunately, one of the ladies who worked at the counter, she, at the gate, she was so sweet. She came over and she just gently touched my shoulder. And she said, no, I'll watch her. She's okay. So they let me be. And she showed me, like, she put me just inside the little rope for the gate, you know, so I was just inside of the waiting area, which seems like a trivial thing, but it gave me a little bit extra space, and it gave me a place to sit. I didn't have to sit on the floor. And then she arranged it so that I would get the first seat on the plane, and I was the first one on the plane. And then she said, as soon as you land, as soon as they pull up to the gate, you go. I'm going to make sure that they know, and you just go. So I did that hour flight home. And then, of course, as we land, I run out the doors straight to the taxi. Now, Norwegians are extreme when it comes to queues. It is, yeah, you like skipping in queue is almost as bad as murdering someone. It's like, that is just not allowed. And I'm desperate. So I'm running out, and the queue is long. It's massive. So I thought, okay, if I just go to one of the taxis further back. They're like, nope, go to the front. And I tried to go to the front, and they're like, no. And I said, please. And then again, I heard myself say, my daughter just died. I need to get home. And then the people just pull away. Nobody says anything. Nobody, you know, but they just move away. And I get a taxi. Get to the hospital. I run in, and I see my husband, and he just shakes his head, and I just collapse in his arms. Of course, I was too late. I'd already done it. So then I had to wait another few hours before I would get to see my daughter again and hold her.
Wow, Tonje, I can't imagine. I say that a lot on the show, but being alone and clearly you're in shock and at first in denial. And one thing that I was wondering is, do you think there was any benefit for having to say those words before you got there, to having to admit it?
No, it really wasn't, because I had to get home.
Yeah.
Right. I had to put myself in that state to be able to stand on my feet. Like, once I was at the hospital and I was in my husband's arms, and it was no chance, they cut her open. Like, there was no coming back from that. Then I just collapsed, and we just cried. And I don't know how long we cried, but we would just sit on the floor just crying. Getting home in that state, like, that would have been impossible.
Yeah. And where was your oldest daughter at this time?
She was at home as well. So she was at home, and she actually, because what happened was that my husband was a bit surprised that she hadn't gotten up in the morning when she normally did. The oldest one had gotten up, and not the youngest one. So he went in to check on her, and he found her dead. But then he tried, of course, to resuscitate her, and he was on the phone. And so he put her on the kitchen table, and my daughter's there, and she's seeing the whole thing. By that time, she already had like death spots on her, and blood coming out. And he was trying his best. And then, of course, like the fire department, the police officers, the ambulances all show up, and my husband got my mom to come over and pick her up, so she got to go home at that stage. But that whole section up until my mom came, which was after the fire department, she was there, she saw it all.
Does she remember?
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
So after you reunite, you said it was still some time, a couple hours before you got to see your daughter.
Mm.
What's going on in the meantime?
Nothing. We just cried. The whole time we just cried. Like, I know some people, there was the priest that tried to talk to us. I told him, just fuck off. It's like, don't even come close to me.
Right.
No, we didn't have space for anything else. We just cried until they were done with the autopsy. And then we were led in to see her. Yeah. Before that, I don't remember. Like that space, it was just crying.
Well, what was it like when you got in there to see her?
It was the most surreal thing. And I came in, and I remember, like, one of the weirdest thing about it was that as I was looking at her, I asked for permission to touch her. Like, I asked somebody else who I don't even know for permission to touch my own daughter, And they were like, yeah, of course you can lift her up. And I lifted her up, and the first thing I felt was the staples at the back of her head. And that's something I will never forget. But at the same time, just it was still nice to be able to sit and hold her. Of course, she's cold, and it's not the same. They look different, but it was still a beautiful thing to be able to do. And I sat and held her for hours. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad you have that. And with as much as I'm struggling sitting here hearing you tell your story, it's only a fraction of what you felt that day. And I'm thank you for sharing so many details with us. After this point, there's a lot of not so fun stuff that has to happen, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
Did you have help at this point? I mean, I'd imagine there's contacting funeral places, that there's telling everyone. Are these responsibilities that you and your husband had to take on yourself?
Yes and no. We did have a lot of help, especially from my dad. He was the one that like contacted the funeral agency and helped us a bit. But yeah, you still had to do it. We had to find the songs we wanted to use and set up and plan everything. And it's a crazy, crazy situation. One kind of benefit was that it happened in February and it was really cold. So we were actually able to take her home from the hospital and have her at home until the funeral. So we had like her little casket in her crib, and I just had the windows open, and that way I could just sit with her and be with her. And I dressed her in her favorite pajamas, and I actually put makeup on her. It sounds like a crazy thing to do, but I did it especially for my other daughter, because she didn't look nice with the whole, the spots that you get. So I actually put makeup on her so that she looked like herself. And then I braided her hair, and that way her sister got to come in and say goodbye to her sister in her own bedroom, and in, looking the way that she knew her. So it was a beautiful part of it. But of course, it's painful, It's and it's like I'm so happy that I did that I was the one to, kind of prepare her and do that stuff. And it's silly, but I can't seem to shake it. I still to this day regret not changing her nappy because the hospital put a nappy on her, and that was weird. But I didn't change that. I left it and just put pajamas on. And it's such a stupid thing because it doesn't matter, right? But in my head, it's like, why didn't I just do that as well?
Is a nappy, is that a diaper?
Yeah.
Like, okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I was going to clarify for the American listeners also that cues are lines. I think most of them know that, but it's not a very common word to use here. But
my husband is British, so that's why the nappies come in.
okay. Tonje, I'm so glad you had that time. It's something I've never heard. I don't know if that opportunity is given often in the United States, or okay, and you're shaking your head no for even Norway. Did her sister? You said you put makeup on her so that she'd look better, and her sister was able to see her. Did the older sister spend much time in the same room during those days?
No, she didn't spend a lot of time, but she would come and go,
Yeah.
And she would make like little drawings for her that she would then like put into the crib. And so I think it was extremely valuable for her because she got to have time to take it in. It wasn't, and where it was in the hospital, those rooms, they're not nice. It's not a nice place to go. It's not. Yeah, it's hard to be natural, and it's such a difficult thing on its own that for her to be able to experience it in a safe environment, a place where she felt safe. But she wasn't in there like I had to dress up in warm clothes and because it was freezing in the room, and and I would just sit and hold her, but she would just come in for a little bit and just give her a little gift and then leave.
Well, that sounds about as peaceful as it could get in a time like that.
Yeah.
I've got a few more practical questions, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
The death of a child is unexpected in all cases. There was an autopsy very quickly. Were the police involved after that? Was there a bigger investigation? Can you just tell us a little bit about that process too?
Yeah. They the police were involved straight away. It's not usual for a 1.5-year-old to die,
Right.
without any reason. They did do the autopsy and they found absolutely nothing. So it's been classed as SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
Which basically just means they can't find a reason. So they have no clue. My husband was terrified initially because he was alone, and he was especially scared that I was going to blame him. So because I wasn't home, he was the one supposed to look after them. So straight away he said to the police, "Yeah, just do whatever. Check what you want. I'll answer whatever questions." And so we just kind of said, "Yeah, come." They came in, they checked the house, they went around. We just said, like, "Sure, come in, do whatever you want," and just kind of blocked it out. But they were really respectful in the way that they were doing it. So it wasn't, even though they came into our house and were looking around, they were talking to everyone, and they were doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just happy to kind of have our names cleared.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
What was it like? I mean, has your husband told you what it was like in those moments when he first discovered her?
Yeah. I think he also went, you have to go for flight or fight, right? And for him, that's like I said, he was trying to do CPR and everything, even though he knew that he knew she was dead,
Hmm.
but he was trying his best because he just had to try. Um, but like I said, he had a lot of fear that I was going to blame him.
Yeah.
And I think it was like, I've lost my daughter. What if I lose my wife as well?
Wow.
So I think he went very much to that. He was really scared before I got home, and and we talked, and I said to him clearly, of course, I don't blame you. Mm.
I think something that a lot of humans have in common is blaming themselves for much smaller things than this.
Mm.
Whenever something goes wrong, I want to take responsibility, and I often blame myself. And I can tell you things from when I was 12 years old that have had no impact on this world that are still in my brain. Like, I can't fucking believe that, and I blame myself. And I can't imagine um, the healing that he has had to go through, that you've both have had to go through. And I do want to get to the healing. But one final question I have was, when you had your daughter at home,
Yeah.
and even after the funeral and everything, how much did your oldest understand?
She, we know now that she understood quite a lot, but it was actually, and this is kind of going into a different topic then, but um, that was something we worried a lot about, you know, for a long time, because even though you can talk to a 3.5-year-old, you still don't know what they're saying related to what they actually think and experience and what they might think later on. And for her as well, it was extremely difficult to not have a reason. You know, she would go to kindergarten and later into school. And kids ask, and she's like, I have no answer, and she really struggled with that. We tried straight away to get her therapy. We reached out to try and see if we could get someone to just evaluate her. Not that she was having problems, but we wanted to have her checked because we're just parents. We didn't have any qualifications at the time to be able to see whether she might have some lingering trauma or something that might come up later on. I knew that it's quite normal for kids as well to make up their own stories in their head, and then all of a sudden they blame themselves for what happened because nobody's told them anything else. So we tried to get her help, and we actually got a letter back saying that we're so sorry to hear that she has lost her sister, but since she's not suicidal, we don't see that she needs any help. So I was like, yeah, and she was 3.5.
I am immediately angered by that, but also I'll be honest. I'm going to try to lighten the mood here with this comment. Um, I also like to hear that the United States is not the only place that has to put up with bullshit bureaucracy and stupid things like that. So I'm sorry you had to go through that, but it makes me feel a little less bad as some of our American healthcare problems that we have today. So first, I'm going to commend you for seeking therapy, and I'm always incredibly impressed with the resiliency of children. There are so many times that I don't know how an adult can get through things, and children seem to find a way. And I'm glad that she had supportive parents who looked to do the right things. And that does bring us to the part of healing. So what does healing look like to you? Did you have a therapist at the time or find one afterwards?
I didn't actually have a therapist. No, it was in my case, it was actually a requirement because I mean, let's face it, I was not in a good state. So I wasn't able to go back to work straight away. So I went on sick leave, and then I was actually required to get a therapist to be on sick leave. But the waiting line is so long that, after 6 years, I didn't hear anything. So,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. So didn't have that. Initially, the thing that got me and my husband up in the morning was that we had our other daughter, who needed parents. I knew that my other daughter needed a mom. So I knew that I had to get up. I had to make her food, make her breakfast. I had to do all the mom stuff. But I didn't think that I needed to live. Like my life, there was no life there anymore. I had my daughter to look out for, and I had my grief. And I was just trying to make things as normal for her as I could and thinking that that was fine. But eventually, she was the first one to open my eyes because I caught her suddenly saying about 50 times in one day, "Are you okay, Mom?" And that made me realize, like, okay, crap, that's not her job to look out for me.
Right.
So then I realized I had to do something. And first thing I did was to just kind of physically try to do things to change my situation, because that was easier. I wasn't giving up on things, but I was scared of losing any memories of her. So I started doing courses and reading books on memory retention and that kind of stuff. And I came across a book that spoke about the natural state, emotional state we should be in is happy. And I thought that was really weird. I thought you had to do something to become happy. And he said, no, in the book, he said, your natural state is happy. And then something happens that makes you really happy or makes you sad. So then I thought, okay, that actually means that I can be happy. And I had an epiphany that I was actually able to grieve and be happy at the same time. So that opened the door for me. So then I started digging into personal growth, and I got a coach, started getting coaching. Mm-hmm. And that was really that was the trigger for me. Like that was the main thing that switched things around. Getting coaching, and then, getting my own coaching certificates and getting into it that way, and that made me also realize that my journey was very long of healing, and it could have been a lot shorter with good coaching earlier on. But I'm still happy that I've gone through everything I have. It was a long process, but it was a journey I had to do.
Can you tell us a little more about the coaching and what's that coaching like? What do you work on in coaching?
Yeah. So coaching can be so many things. For me in that state, it was actually, it started off being just, I knew that I was starting to almost get like social anxiety, not wanting to go out. So I actually just first joined a group coaching just because if I saw somebody online, at least that was some kind of social interaction. And I had no clue what coaching was. I had no clue what it was. I just signed up because I needed to see some people. And at that point, it was really just coaching is about identifying what's holding you back in life, right? And finding a way to find good ways for you to cope with that. I like to say to change your challenges into empowerment or strengths so that you can create a great life and reach your goals. It's very much about knowing what you want and figuring out what you want and how to get there. So where therapy often talks a lot about the past and has you sit there and feel your feelings and, be in it, coaching is more future orientated. So you can look at the past, what happened, to identify why you are where you are, but then let's look at the future and where we can go.
Nice. Okay. Thank you for that. That's very helpful.
Yeah. And Tonje, you mentioned a book that was very helpful for you. Do you remember the name of that book? I would like to put it on our site to make it available to our listeners.
It actually wasn't a very good book, so I don't remember or the author.
Just something with that part of it
was just
resonated.
that one. Yeah, it was that one phrase.
Okay.
It was that one phrase.
We do not want to share bad books, resources, coaches, anything like that. So understandable. I appreciate the honesty in that answer. Is there anything during this journey that you've learned that you would like to share with the audience?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Oh, love that question. Well, you know what? For one, when I reflect back on that journey I had through hell, getting home, the one thing that really stands out for me is how much worse it was because people around me didn't know what to do and how to treat me and talk to me. And, and that made me realize very early on, I had the same struggles when I got home with everyone I knew as well. Nobody knew how to talk to me or deal with me because we tried to hide from grief and sad stuff. So I really noticed then that we need to become better at supporting each other. We need to learn how to support someone in grief. So I made it my mission to try and be that bridge between people who are grieving and people who can be there to support them, because it doesn't take a lot. On my journey, there was one person who showed me compassion, and all she did was, gently touch me and tell me, you can sit here. She did simple things, and it made a world of difference to me. And so, yeah, I really, that was like my biggest learning point, that if we can learn to support each other, we can make this journey of healing, because I don't say a journey through grief, because I think that you live with grief for the rest of your life if it's severe. But the journey to heal to where the point where you can live with it, especially, can be so much shorter and less painful if people know how to talk to you and be around you.
Yeah, for sure. That's wonderful advice. And we get a lot of advice for grief on here. Too many people have been through exactly what you have, in that people around them don't know how to support them. And I think we need to make that a movement. We need to make people, death is going to happen to all of us, to everyone around us. And the reaction in the US is to make somebody food and take it to them. And that is good. But as Allie, who was on the podcast for grief, to speak about grief, she said there's only so many meatloafs or whatever that you want and need. And at some point it's like, well, what the hell how can someone be there for you? And not just be there for you, but be there for what you need.
I feel like there's some synergy there. Is you have extra meatloaf and you need people to be there for you. There's room for a grief party, I think.
All right.
Some kind of gathering.
I think so. So Tonje, you're coaching now. Tell us a little bit about that. Like, where can people find you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm coaching people who want to get through their challenges, like maybe through grief, maybe loss, to help them to build a new amazing life, because like you've said as well before, I heard you say it, Scott, that, your future dies in an instant. And that's what happens when something traumatic happens in your life and you have to build a new life. So I help people do that. I also have created a online course called Grief Untangled, which is for the supporters. So for anyone who wants to learn, what to say, the do's and don'ts of grief support, then they can definitely have a look at that. I do have I have a free guide if you want to offer that to your listeners. I think they might appreciate it, which is a short version, a quick guide of support.
Okay.
And all of that is all of that on your website?
It is on my website, and I'll be happy to send it to you as well. And also, I'm found on Instagram is the best platform for me, but I'm also
Okay.
on Facebook, and it's at Tonje Wyn-Jones. So my name in one word.
Okay.
Perfect. This will
Nobody.
all be in the show notes.
I was gonna say nobody has to write that down or try to figure out how to spell it. We will share that for you. But Tonje, thank you so much for being on here today. You've passed the decent fucking human test. We are extraordinarily grateful and humbled and thankful, and I don't have enough words to throw at you. But thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. You've been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, like for creating this space. And, I've been listening to your podcast and I know, like you say, you've been talking about grief. And I think that the way that you create this space to talk about these difficult stories, but in a very human way, where, you don't have to sit in the sadness all the time. And I think a lot of people are afraid of talking about grief because they think, well, if I just open up this Pandora's box, then everything is misery. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can talk like we're talking. It doesn't have to be all sad.
For sure.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it. And if it wasn't for such decent human beings such as yourself, this show would be awful. So thank you for being here.
I know we basically provide the ability for great people to talk at us, and occasionally I interrupt and say something stupid. So you all are the stars. And again, I don't even know why people are so willing to come in and share their stories with us, but I'm so thankful that you do. But terrible. All right. Thank you so much. Terrible listeners. Remember that you can follow us on our social media, Instagram and Facebook at Positively Terrible. If you want to get in touch with us via email, you want to be on the show or get the decent fucking human tattoo.
Don't do it.
Dan always says don't do that, but I know you want to. Do not listen to Dan. Email us at podcast@positivelyterrible. And as always, this has been absolutely, positively terrible.
I met you back at Tonje Fest. I confess I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right. And that night we got into a water gun fight that I won. I shot you in the face. It was fate. I offered you a spree. You declined. I said keep it. You might decide to change your mind. You did. Yeah, you did. Now I'm glad I got you in my life. It's alright if you don't want to spree. I'm just glad to have your company. Then we got Rhino after that. Rhino was the fattest cat. Now we got Elru. I am so lucky I found you. And then I know you like the boss. Or I am never at a loss to find the words that I should say. Because I love you to this day. It was fate. I offered you a spree. You declined. I said keep it. You might decide to just change your mind. You did. Yeah, you did. Now I'm glad I got you in my life. It's alright if you don't want to spree. I'm just glad to have your company. Met you back at Tonje Fest. I confess I was nervous and stressed because I thought you were the best. I was right.
Positively Terrible is a part of the Terrible Podcast Network.